Hi guys! In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about the series that I've been reading. As we've been doing this channel, we have gotten through a lot of series, and even though I say through, I really mean we have started a lot of series, and now I am in 22, I believe. Wait. Actually, technically 23 series, and that's kind of crazy. So since we're in the middle of literally so many series, I figured that I would let you know if they are worth the hype, if I recommend them, if I'm continuing the series, all the things. First things first, I'm going to start off with regular romance. First thing we have is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Now, this is actually the third book in the series. Sam and I actually learned that you didn't have to read the books in order when it came to this series. Obviously, there might be a couple spoilers here and there, but it's definitely a series where you don't necessarily have to. So we went into this third book, just jumped right in, knowing nothing about the series, and we really loved it. We're following Emma and Justin. Emma is a nurse who has a couple of issues. She has a lot of mommy troubles, and she basically hops around with her adoptive family slash best friend, and they are travel nurses together. She ends up hearing about this guy named Justin. He ends up telling a story about how every time that he goes on a date with somebody, they end up falling in love with someone else after they break up, and how it's a string of other people finding their forever partners. And she actually has the same luck. They end up getting in contact and talking about it, and then go from there. I don't know if I'm gonna read the other ones. Even though we liked it a lot, I just feel like I kind of got what I wanted from this book, and I don't know if the other ones are ones that we're super into, so I'm going to leave this as like a maybe. Next we have Things We Never Got Over. This is by Lucy Score. This is following Naomi and Knox. Naomi is a girl who just ran out from her wedding, didn't want to marry the guy. Her life is falling apart. She hears from a long lost twin who she barely ever gets in contact with, and the twin is asking her for help. And so she goes, even though her life is in shambles, she goes to help her twin and ends up going into all sorts of drama. Her twin has a daughter she never knew about. She abandons her. Long story short, Naomi is now with a niece that she didn't know existed and needs to figure out what she's going to do with her life. And then in comes Knox, who of course plays Grumpy to her sunshine and starts to help her out. And we liked it enough to keep reading the series, but it's definitely not something that we would make like a top priority. So it's like, when I need a good palette cleanser, I'd pick one of these up. Next we have the Magnolia Park series. This is by Jessa Hastings. It's following a group of social elites. You're following Magnolia and her love interest BJ, and then in the Daisy Hates side of all of these books, you're following Daisy and her love interest Christian. A lot of people refer to this as similar to Gossip Girl vibes. It's just a bunch of drama, a bunch of toxicness. I always say that this is romance with an asterisk because you really don't want anything that's happening in here. It's more just the entertainment, not anything that you'd necessarily be rooting for. I don't know how else to explain it, but we are definitely continuing the series, and we love specifically the Daisy Hates perspectives of these books, but we are continuing with all of them. Next we have Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. This is a part of the Lakefront Billionaire series. You're following Julian and Dahlia, who have been lifelong academic rivals. They grew up together, their families are friends, and they just have always had this tension between them. Basically what ends up happening is Dahlia comes back into town after her life starts to fall apart, and her and Julian have a type of project where they're renovating a house together, and obviously they clash and then they come together. You really liked it. Again, it's another one of those books that I feel like we want to read, but it's more on the back burner because we have so many other series that we're reading. Now, the last book that I have in the romance specific section of all of these series is the Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez. This is another one of those types of books where you don't have to read the series in order. This is not the same series as Just for the Summer. This is a different one. This is the Friend Zone series, I believe. Sloane is an artist trying to get her life back together after her fiance's passing, and Jason is a musician who's on the road, who just hit his big break. Jason is out of town leaving his dog with somebody, and the dog actually escapes. Sloane is literally driving on the side of the street, and Tucker, the dog, comes racing at her, and she ends up watching him for Jason, and that's how they start interacting. We really like Abby Jimenez's writing, and so if another one of the books in the series catches our attention, we will, but it's not a series that we're putting high priority again. So that is all with regular romance. Next, I'm going to go into a YA non-fantasy section. It's kind of a little mismatched, but these were the ones that didn't specifically go into like the romantasy section, so I kind of pushed them all together. First, we have Impulse by Ellen Hopkins. This is following 3 teenagers who are suffering from a multitude of mental issues. You have Tony, Connor, and Vanessa. This is a super important book, but it is also very triggering. I highly recommend that you, well, first, I always recommend that you always look up trigger warnings, but this book especially is very triggering. It's talking about self-harm, it's talking about addiction, it's talking about suicide. So if any of those things were to bother you, I really don't recommend this. But the thing that's really cool about this book, other than obviously talking about some things that are very important, It's actually in poem form. That was super interesting for us, and we definitely liked the change in format. There's only one other book in this series, and we do think that we'll eventually pick it up. Next on our list, we have Shatter Me by Tara Mafi. This is a series that we really don't think we're going to continue, even though I know that it has so much hype. This is following Juliet in a dystopian type world. She has this special ability where she cannot be touched. If you touch her, you will either die or start to get severely injured depending on how long you're touching her. We really didn't feel strongly about this book. I wanted to really like it. This series is so big, if I can show. Like, there are so many books in this series. Everyone that reads this says so many things about it, but it just really wasn't for us. I'm leaning more towards no on finishing the series, even though I do think if you like dystopian that you would like this. It's just we are really not in the dystopian type mood almost ever, and so I think this is a no. Next we have If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. This started out being a standalone book, and I never ever thought that there was going to be any sort of sequel to it. But there has since been a second book made, and it is in another person's perspective of this book. So you're following Autumn and Finn, who have been childhood, lifelong friends, and they kind of are always playing that right person, wrong time type of scenario where one is either with someone else or they drift apart or whatever the case may be, but they kind of have always felt like they should be together in some type of way. But you're seeing them in high school as they're drifting in and out of each other's lives, and you're just following their journey. I felt like this book was really good, but the second book is in Finn's point of view, and I've heard terrible things about it, that everyone was super disappointed and that it's not even following Finn's point of view as much as they would like. I really don't think that we'd ever read the second one. I want to keep this story like preserved because I really did love this first book. It's a no for continuing the series. Next we have None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney. This is another book that I only thought was going to be one standalone, one and done, and I ended up bumping into the second of this while we were just at Barnes & Noble. This is following two teenagers named Emma and Travis. They are both related to serial killer type backgrounds. You end up learning more about their specific stories. They have been brought on by the FBI to help them in a serial killer case who was specifically targeting teenagers. It was super interesting, and I definitely think I got the good like Criminal Minds vibes without it being too exact copy and paste, but it was talking about serial killers, and it was talking about the FBI, and it was talking about behavioral units, so it's as close to Criminal Minds as you can get. I really did like that aspect of it. I felt like it was way better than we thought it was going to be, and it was a good like surprise. We might read the next one, but heavy on the maybe. Last for this section of books, we have The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp. This book doesn't have the dust jacket, so it looks a little funky, but it's normally like a bright red book. This is following Nora, and she is in a bank with her friend and her girlfriend. They're just dealing with normal teenager things when all of a sudden the bank starts to get robbed. And you would think like maybe that's the main focus of the story, but it is not, because Nora is actually the daughter of a pretty famous set of criminals. Burglars have no idea who they're messing with. So it's basically about how she is dealing with this burglar situation, but you're also finding out things about her past, what happened to her when she was younger, why she's so different, why she hides things, her secrets, all kinds of things. And we really did like it. This was another book that's pleasantly surprised us in the YA section. We don't give YA enough credit. I always end up feeling like I'm going to be disappointed. I do think that we're going to read the second book eventually. It's just not on our priority list. Again, I feel like I'm saying about everything, but there are so many books that we need to get to, and I feel like the series list is just going to keep growing exponentially, and there's nothing I can do to change it. Like, I just feel like there's way too many. Now I'm going to be going on to YA romantasy. Now these are all books that as of right now in the series, there's only one that I put a little asterisk to this rule. From what I know as of right now, none of these books have spice in them and are labeled YA, so I'm putting them all together. First thing on our list is Light Lark. Now this is by Alex Astor, and we loved this book. This was one of the first fantasy romances in a really long time that I have felt like absolutely completely taken up by. I felt like right when I started reading it, it just captured me right up. While we were reading this, I feel like, I mean, I didn't even pick up the camera once, and I just blew right through it because it was so good. It just like hit the spot of exactly what I wanted. You're following Isla Crown. She is the ruler of a realm called Wildling, and there are 6 realms in total in this world, and they are all stuck in this curse. The whole story and plotline is about this curse that they're trying to break, and they only can get together to break this curse every 100 years at a centennial. Because part of the curse is that there's this big crazy storm that has separated them all and has made made it impossible for them to reach each other than this 100-year centennial. During the centennial, they play a series of games, these leaders, to try to not only break the curse, win the game, but also figure out which group of them are going to die, because in order for the curse to be officially broken, one of their realms does have to die. This is definitely going to get finished, and probably soon, honestly. Next is an oldie but a goodie, and we have the Twilight series. This is by Stephanie Meyer, and there are plenty of things involved with the Twilight series. I'm sure you've heard of it before. If you haven't, you're following Bella, Edward, Jacob. Bella is a human, and she has fallen in love with Edward, who is a vampire, and has a best friend named Jacob, who is a werewolf. And obviously, if you know anything about the fantasy world, those two do not get along, and she's kind of stuck in the middle, trying to figure out what she wants to do, who she wants. That's what these are about, and she's also in high school while this is happening. I know that the last book for Twilight, and I mean like Breaking Dawn last book, because I know they've added others since then, but from the original saga, the last book has a decent amount of spice in it, and we will be reading the series. But again, this is another series where it's just not on our priority list. I've watched the movies more times than I can count, honestly, and I just feel like because I know the story already so well, I can't put this at the forefront because I have so many worlds I need to know about. Next we have Caraval. This is by Stephanie Garber. This was a book that was particularly awful to get through. And I know there are a lot of people that love this, and I know that so many people say that the first book is hard and that the second book is better. I just have such a hard time getting past the first bad book, which I'm not saying this is bad necessarily, but it just was not our vibe. It was not something that I was excited about. If you don't know what this is about, this is following, what are their names even? This is following Scarlett and Tella. They are sisters, and they have a really abusive father and an absentee mother. They don't know where she is. But basically, they are trying to survive their really crappy home life. Their dad really sucks. And in a way to try to get herself to think of other things and dream of a better future, Scarlett has been writing the creator of Caraval, who's named Legend. She's been writing him to try to get them access to this super secretive Caraval, because you have to get specific invitations to, and at some point he answers and says yes, and they go to Caraval. And when they get there, Tella actually gets abducted, and that becomes the game of the Caraval, is to try to find her, and if you find her, get a wish. Everyone in the game is trying to find her. Scarlett's just trying to get her sister back, and that's what the whole thing is about. I just didn't love it, and I really don't know if we're going to continue the series, because there's another series by this author called the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, and we haven't started that one because they say that you should read this first, and so we wanted to read that one, but we were told to read this first, so we started reading this when we didn't even want to read this. You see our problem? So I think we're gonna have to like push our way through, but I really just want to get to the other one. It's a maybe, most likely a yes, but not an excited yes, more like a yes. I know there are a lot of fans of this book. I know there are a lot of fans of this world, of this author, of everything about it. And I'm just here to tell you I'm not one of those fans. And that, again, it's nothing to do. I never want to hate on anyone else's book taste, because everyone has their own journey and everyone experiences it differently. And this might have been the best book to ever walk across your freaking reading nook. You know, this might have changed your life. I have no idea. This was so hard for us to get through. I don't know what it was. This is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and Sam and I had such a hard time getting through this. I went into it kind of hoping for more of a romance, and there wasn't one. But if you don't know what this is about, you're following Jude, who is a human. She has two sisters. When Jude was little, her parents were actually murdered by someone from the Fae world, and they were abducted, taken to this world, and they've been living there as humans. And in this world, humans are treated like absolute garbage. They are getting bullied, they are getting hurt. This is also kind of like a royalty type of vibe where there's a king and princes and all this kind of stuff. I highly doubt you will ever see me reading this. Last from this section, we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Now, I love this series, and I want to say specifically that I totally get where people are coming from when they say that it is exactly like Hunger Games or exactly like many other books. It really is. I'm not going to go into this description talking about how this book is like a one in a million story, because it's not. It's definitely very similar, if not exact, to a lot of other things, but I feel like has hit me in such a nostalgic way and brought me back to way back when I first fell in love with reading, that this series has a very special place in my heart. So I feel like I'm always going to be obsessed with it. I'm definitely going to continue reading it, but if you don't know what it's about, You're following Peyton and Kai. Peyton is a girl without powers living in a world where it's dangerous to not have powers. You are hunted, you are killed, you are exiled, you are all kinds of things because they do not want anyone without powers living there. And then you have Kai, who his sole purpose as like a being is to find and kill the people without powers. And of course, they find a way to fall for each other. First book is definitely more like the Hunger Games vibes, where it's talking specifically about these games that they have in this world. The only thing that makes it kind of different is there's like rounds rather than it being like the Hunger Games where it's just kind of like this one big thing. But the first book is about that, and then the other books since then, they haven't talked about the game specifically. They're more just like about the world in general. They're definitely going to continue the series because we love it. The last books that I'm going to be talking about, I just want to give a forewarning about. They are romantasy, but they are specifically spicy. And if that's not your cup of tea, hey, all power to you. It was amazing having you here. I appreciate you so much. And don't watch it. But if you don't care about spice or you want the spice for whatever reason, these are the series that we're in the middle of or reading that do have spicy scenes, and some of them quite a lot. I feel like I couldn't talk about spicy romantasy without referencing this book. We have gotten through all of the books that are out currently from this series. This is the Ektar series by Sarah J. Maas. This is very popular. Again, I'd be very surprised if you don't know what this is about, but if you don't, this is following Feyre, and she is a human girl living in the human world who happens to live very, very close to all the Fae. In this world, the Fae and humans have been separated by this wall since a big, big war way back when. They're enemies, they don't talk to each other, they don't work together, they're killing each other, bad things. But Feyre and her family live pretty close to it, so it's a little dangerous where she lives. But while she is out hunting for her family, she ends up killing this wolf. She has a bad feeling about it, but she does it anyway, and it ends up being a Fae that just looked like a wolf. And so when the other Fae that had something to do with that particular Fae come knocking for Feyre, she ends up getting abducted and having to go back with them. And there starts the story. We are going to be continuing the series. This specifically is not, this series doesn't get spicy until later on, but I have it in this category because when it gets spicy, it is spicy. Next we have King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. You are following, I never figured out how to pronounce this girl's name. I truly can't, but it's Isolde. You're following her, who is a human living in a vampire human type world, and there's other monsters at play and like demons and stuff like that. Basically, she is part of the royalty, and in order to kind of create like an alliance and stop a lot of like invasions and war and all this kind of crazy stuff, she ends up getting married to the vampire king named Adrian. She actually tries to kill him, and he thwarts it and realizes what she's doing and is like, if you don't get it together, like, I'm gonna force you to be something awful. And so she tries to get it together, ends up being with him and leaving her kingdom behind, and starts to fall in love with her mortal enemy. So that's what this book is about. I don't know if we're going to continue the series because this really read kind of like a Wattpad, where it was heavy on the spice and it didn't really make sense why they were into each other. I mean, you end up finding things out later on and like it starts to make more sense, but I don't know. We just didn't feel strongly about it while we were reading it. And so again, it's one of those that like, if the second book got handed to me, would I read it? Sure. But am I going to put it on the top of my list for my TBR? No. Another book that kind of follows that same sentiment is Pestilence by Laura Thalassa. This is the Four Horsemen series. You're following pestilence, war, famine, and death. And they are all the four horsemen who go to all the ups and ends of the world and start the apocalypse. Each book is referencing the own specific being. And so this first book is about Pestilence. He ends up meeting Sarah when she tries to kill him and she fails. He ends up taking her as like a hostage situation and dragging her around through all his apocalypse-like errands, and she ends up starting to fall for him. The thing that we didn't like about this that would keep us probably from continuing on with this series is it definitely went from 0 to 100 like way too quickly in terms of their relationship. It just felt like an instant, lusty, lovey connection that didn't really make sense. It kind of felt like the spice took over a lot of this and they didn't have like a natural good connection. So maybe going along with other romantasies, we have The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This is the Crowns of Nyaxia series. We loved this book. We rated it really highly, and actually I believe this is the series where the third book comes out on my birthday, which is super funny. This is following Oriah, who is a human girl living in a vampire world, which is kind of common. I feel like I've said that a lot of times. The vampires are heavily at play in the books that I've been reading. Oriah's family was actually killed in like a raid type war situation, And when she is amongst the rubble of all her family, a couple of vampires happen upon her, and one of them is actually the king of all the vampires. He takes her in as his own and is raising her as an adopted daughter. But the only thing that is causing issues is that she is living in a world where you need magic and you need powers to be safe. She is really strong when it comes to battle and taking care of herself, and she can wield all these blades, but everyone else has magic and fangs and immortality, and those are kind of one-upping her. So the only way that she's going to be able to be as strong and resilient as she wants and be able to take care of herself is by winning a competition called the Kajari. It's kind of along that like Hunger Games vibe, similar to like how Powerless was, where it's big games but there's rounds rather than it being just the one. And she is with a bunch of other vampires, and there's this one in particular that she knows that she shouldn't like and she knows that she shouldn't work with, but she does, and she likes him. I really did like this. It was definitely captivating for the entire time, which is a little tricky sometimes when the book starts to get a little thick, so really like that. Yes. So this is from Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and we love her writing and we love this series, but this series is also a part, well, not a part, but goes alongside with another series, and you kind of read the books like intermittently. So it's the Blood and Ash series, and then Flesh and Fire is the other one. So you read like a couple of this one and then the other one, and you kind of go back and forth. The only thing that's been making us not read this is, one, the books are huge, and two, the series is so never ending that I feel like we're just never going to get to the end of it. And even though I originally was excited that there were so many books, now that we've taken on so many other series, thought of jumping back into the series that has so much to it, I'm overwhelmed. This is definitely one that we're going to get to, but I feel like it's always going to be one where we read a bunch of books and come back to this, and a bunch of books and then come back to it, because it's just so hefty. In this, you are following Poppy, who is living a maiden life. She's not touched, she's not seen, she's not interacted with, she's not spoken to, she's hidden from the public, and again, a vampire world. But they're called different things in this. There's like vampire type beings, there's shapeshifter slash werewolf type beings, there's gods and goddesses, god and goddess children. In terms of the world, Poppy is supposed to be kind of like forsaken as part of like a ritual. She ends up falling for this guy who's one of her guards, who she has absolutely no business talking to, because once she hits a certain age, she is going to be given up to the gods. And so she doesn't have any control over herself, any control of her like future, has no plans, nothing, because she thinks that she's going to be given, sacrificed. The other series that goes along with it, Flesh and Fire, is following a different set of people, but they're along the same type of world, and I think their stuff ends up, I know that you can't read them alone, or you can, but like it messes things up for each other, so this will take for us forever. One of my favorite books of all time. This is Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. I loved this book. It was exactly what I wanted. It literally kickstarted this channel. Sorry if things look different. Of course the battery died. This is following all of the different princes of sin. So we have, this is about envy, we have like gluttony and wrath and pride. I felt like it was something I hadn't heard of before, and it just hit the spot at the exact moment. This again is about Prince of Envy, and he is trying to save his court because his court is kind of failing. It's kind of unknown why in the beginning, what's going on, why it's failing, whatever. He is trying to save it by winning this game. So there's rules, and there's hints, and there's riddles, and there's hexed objects, and all these different players that you don't know about, and there's all this stuff going on, but it ends up bringing him to an artist named Camilla, who's living in the human world, just doing her thing, painting. She has a gallery, she's just living her normal life, and he walks into her shop and changes her whole world around and asks her to paint something that she flat out refuses to paint. We are 100% going to continue the series. The last book that we have recently added to our entire list of series is Ninth House. I'm actually going to be showing that in a reading vlog coming up, so I'm not going to talk too much about like my feelings towards it, but it is following the Yale secret societies and a girl named Alex. Basically, she is part of the house that's supposed to watch all of the other secret society houses and keep them all in line and make sure they're following the rules. They're like the checks and balance system of the secret societies of Yale. I think it was so good, is what I will say. I won't say anything else because again, there is a reading vlog attached to it that's going to be coming out soon. But I really liked it, and we are definitely going to be reading the next book in that series. I believe it's only a duology, but We really, really liked it. That is it for this video. I hope you found it interesting. I know I kind of rattled through a lot of books and there was a lot that I had to say. I feel like reading a series is so much fun. When you get into a series that grabs your attention so dramatically, or even like, I mean, I know that there are a lot of books in here that I said that we'd want to continue the series, but it doesn't necessarily have a place super soon. I still feel like it's so nice to know that even if I get into like a slump, that there's always these books where I have a world that I'm already comfortable in. I have characters that I've already met. I have a storyline that I already understand. You know, that's kind of a comforting feeling, especially when you're thinking about reading a lot of books and getting into a book slump and things like that, and especially me as like a content creator in regards to books. It's nice to have a lot of these books just ready and willing and waiting for me to continue reading them, and not necessarily anything new or something that's going to derail me drastically. Like, I know that these are all safe places to be. I really recommend you reading series if that's something you weren't into. Before, I really wasn't a series person. I couldn't get into a story long enough to read a second, if not third, fourth, fifth, however many books there were in the series. I would just stop caring. That's all I have to say. I really appreciate you watching. I feel like we're becoming this cutie little family, and I'm really excited about it. I love you guys so, so much. I appreciate you so, so much. I'm glad that you watched this video. I hope that I at least gave you one stinking book recommendation, and I hope that you get lost in a wonderful, amazing series that grabs your attention and has you literally stuck to it. And I wish a 5-star on you, or 2.